Hi, and welcome to Pathways to Tertiary, or P2T. P2T is an online series of events which has been co-designed by the National Disability Coordination Program, or NDCO for short. P2T is a virtual opportunity for students and those who support them, including parents, caregivers, teachers, and other stakeholders, with access to critical and timely information about preparing for tertiary education. This series provides an opportunity to connect with TAFE, university disability practitioners, and other industry specialists so that students with disability can experience a smoother transition from secondary school into tertiary education. Before we commence today's session, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. In the spirit of reconciliation, the NDCO program acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Before we get started, there is some important housekeeping information I would like to bring to your attention. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. An Auslan interpreter and captioner have been provided for today's session. The captions can be accessed within Zoom as well as via separate URL if you are using a second device. The link to access this will now be placed into the chat box. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the platform shortly after the session, so that those who are unable to attend the live session can still access the information at a later time. At the conclusion of this session, a link to a survey will be placed in the chat box. Please take the time to complete the survey and provide us with feedback on the event. Thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Yerdumarang, Mayingalang, Yonadi, Torn Dixon, Nadu Banigu, Gubara, Radri Nurmbanga, Nina Nangira, Duinya, Gaidalang, Nadu Banigu, Gubara, Muyulangalang, Maradubu, Yalabu, Nadu Banigu, Gubara, Biambugu, Manangu, Wuragabinya.
Good afternoon. My name is David Nathan. I am the NDCO for Northern Sydney. Welcome everyone to Pathways to Tertiary student session. I would like to begin by introducing Ailey. Ailey is an ex-graduate and also Cecilio Pilawong. He is currently a university student. I will start with Ailey's introduction first. Miss Ailey immigrated to Australia from China in 1991. She was diagnosed with a chronic fatigue in 2011, autoimmune disease, fibromyalgia, and tachycardia in 2015. 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Her late diagnosis had forced her to self-manage, and she was expected to perform the same as her peers, which further exacerbated her health issues. Miss Lee's health issues continued throughout her school life, but she managed to achieve good results despite all the troubles through her determination. Student life at the university level was extremely difficult for Miss Lee, as her autism made self-directed, unstructured learning and interacting seem chaotic and confusing. The lack of consistency in interactions with friends she made in one semester and a completely different classes and schedules in the next meant that she was unable to maintain friendships and often felt alienated. It was extremely difficult for Ms. Lee to access mental health services in university. She struggled to advocate for herself, unaware she was on the spectrum, and the university mental health services had limited availability for appointments and a set number of sessions she was entitled to. She was unaware of Medicare mental health plan and did not have the financial resources to see a psychologist, and the local area youth health clinic which provided her previous counselor didn't see anyone over the age of 18. She eventually graduated, taking almost 5 years to complete her 3-year Bachelor of Arts, majoring in Arts History and Theory and Asian Studies. Ms. Lee also managed to work a casual job at a department store for the later half of her university years. A year after graduating, Ms. Lee began to work at a bank. In her first year at work, she completed a Certificate 3 in Financial Service. While Ms. Lee was consistently praised for her good work ethic, quick thinking, and creative solutions, her work life was plagued by the same struggles that she had affected all through university. Ms. Lee is managing her health with assistance from an occupational therapist, psychologist, and other healthcare professionals. She also has taken over as the treasurer and general administrator of AU Together, an initiative to provide adults on autism spectrum a space to offer peer support to one another, and is working on a female-focused offshoot of the peer support group. Ms. Ailey,
Yes.
Your first question will be, did you experience any barriers and can you identify them for us at any time of your education?
Well, I have a lot of sensory issues, but there was really nowhere to escape on campus, really. There was always people in class, but there was just as many people not in class. So yeah, there was always noise, always people sort of almost bumping into you. I know there were like rooms set aside for women or certain groups, but at that time I'd never heard of, quiet rooms, sensory rooms. I mean, if that's different now, that would be wonderful. But honestly, I never even knew there was a women's room until 3rd year of uni. So obviously advertising could be better. I don't actually feel on campus uni culture is that friendly to people on the spectrum or someone suffering social anxiety or sensory sensitivity. Because, with things like that, you don't exactly have a sign over your head saying, oh, please don't shout in my face when you're protesting climate change, or please don't come up to me and start a conversation with me about something because you want me to sign up to something. And people are always doing that, which is, fine. But I would have preferred that they pretended I wasn't there. And, blocking the public spaces with this protest and that protest. I was honestly not sure if I should, try and go around them when I'm exhausted or try and go through them. Like, how do I tackle this? Like, now my route's been cut off. And so these were some of the issues that I had. And it was just exhausting being at uni, no private rest space, carrying around all my things. Because I'm not sure if people are aware, but I usually need to carry around a lot of things, like my survival gear. And at the time when I went to uni, there was definitely no locker facilities. And I had issues with making food choices. Queuing for food was hard. Going through checkout was harder still. But carrying around all my food and water for a day and then not being able to find a single place where I felt safe to sit down. So these were some of the barriers that I was experiencing. And there was one more thing as well, like when I had a very hard time, the bureaucratic process to pause my studies, it was pretty overwhelming to handle. I'm already having a hard time, so needing to queue up for 30 minutes in a square full of people where people are dashing past me because they need to go to their class, which is in the same building, and then speak to about 3 different people and fill in a form to say what's going on. there wasn't any easy way to switch to online studies when I was studying. I don't even know if that's an option now, but yeah, I would just prefer to fail. So my uni results are like that, like really good or just complete failure. I would just stop going to class.
There was a time where you failed the entire semester, am I right?
Yeah, I couldn't leave my house for 3 months, and I couldn't adequately explain to anyone what was going on, because I knew I had a lot of mental health issues growing up, but I didn't have access to any mental health service to tell me what was going on, or give me some hints like this is wrong. I just didn't feel safe, and then I just didn't talk to anyone, just pretended everything was fine, and no one can tell, with uni hours being so sporadic, no one can tell whether I'm supposed to be at home or supposed to be at uni, so no one noticed.
Thank you, Eileen. Whatever information that you are giving, hopefully will help other people think about people like yourself in the situation, and put themselves in your shoes and try to understand the issues that people like you go through. Coming back to Cecilio. Cecilio is a university student. Cecilia, okay, I'll read about yourself first. Having a cerebral palsy, the difficulty. Sorry, Cecilio is from a Laotian ethnic background and is born in Adelaide, Australia. Through his own life experience living with cerebral palsy, he advocates on behalf of people with disabilities in his community. While in school, he represented his local Lao community, voicing their needs, and later via Youth Advisory Council in Salisbury. Cecilio is a fourth-year full-time university student from Flinders University, studying Bachelor of Disability and Development Education. Cecilio also holds a certificate in local government retail operations and disability. At present, he is doing his student placement at the Multicultural Communities Council. He is currently an active member working on projects such as Community Connector Project, Speak My Language, and the Peer Leadership Program. Cecilia was also part of the shape of the city of Salisbury's Beyond the Ramp strategic framework, involved in highlighting the issues of SAYS for people with a disability, and being a part of South Australian Government Social Inclusion Board excuse me, consulting on employment pathways for people with disability, and the South Australian Government's Ministerial Advocacy Committee for Students with a Disability. He has been honored with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, Young Citizens of Year Award for the City of Salisbury, and the Young South Australian of the Year in 2004 in recognition of his community work. He is known for his public speaking skills, volunteering, and commitment to raising awareness of disability issues. Welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you for having me.
Your question is, did you experience areas, and can you identify them for us at any time of your education?
I experienced many barriers throughout my education. The first difficulty was that I was the main communicator for my parents who were unable to speak in English, and that there was no real advocate for me during my primary school years to support me in my learning. I had to adjust myself to the actual mainstream school system, and that there were no such things as a accessible toilet or an actual awareness by the actual teachers during my primary school years of my disability and my support needs. ultimately there was no real translator for my parents, and food became a actual big issue as well, because I actually had to adjust to eating uh, Australian food, and that there was no actual Thai or Laos food um, av- available to me in actual school canteens. Um, I whenever I had troubles, um, we would go to our GP, and my actual parents would just agree to whatever supports uh, were required. When I was actually in tertiary education, um, there was no real considerations made for me in regards to making allocating the actual rooms to be at a lower level. This was especially true in TAFE, and that I actually had to use stairs or lifts, which for me, being having cerebral palsy, was what was quite challenging. And there was also no real support when I was in TAFE. No one spoke to me about the actual range of support services, or there was no actual assistive technology. I actually had to research the actual technology and find my own assistive technology to support my educational needs. So those were the actual barriers that I faced during my time in education so far.
Thank you, Cecilio. I'll come back to you, Ailey. There is a question for you before I go to the next question for you. When things were working well for you, what was it that made it work so well?
Usually the terms when I did well was actually, I think the worst time for me was probably at the end of my first year. Now, at first when you go, you're sort of well rested. So you sort of manage semester one. But in the second semester, it was like I'd already had too much of it. And all my classes were foundational. And they were always these huge classes with like sometimes hundreds of people in a giant auditorium. And then the tutorials as well, you know, they were really full. And it was just really difficult to get a grip on things. I think that first year was the hardest, especially the second semester. That's when I sort of felt like I wanted to just, give up and just sort of retreated. When I did better, that was in like my later years when I realized that I couldn't handle things. And so I might like do a full course full time in the first semester, but in the second semester, I would make it, maybe I only do one course or two. I also found that I did better when the lecture sizes were smaller. It's less intimidating. When the tutorials were smaller as well, again, less intimidating. Yeah, and that was always, and I also really liked when the teachers and tutors gave me direct direction. One of the classes I did best in, the lecturer of that class, like when I asked him for like some help, like he directly recommended, you know, books and such for me to read. And I did those and I did very well in this class. I got like, I think 90, 97. I can't remember now. It's a while ago. But yeah, like I feel like, yeah, the more interaction I had with the actual teachers, especially if they taught one course and then I would have them next semester for another course and we have this familiarity, the easier it was for me to go to them the easier it was for me to understand what they wanted from the assessments.
And from what you are saying, Ailey, I think it is very important for people to be well prepared before they go to uni from school, particularly for people with disabilities, and for them to be provided information and supports that are available in university so that they don't struggle in the early years. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't like going to unfamiliar places. The university is as big as a suburb. You know, and sometimes going from one class to another, I'd be like walking for almost 10 minutes. When things like that happen, I have the map in front of me, and I've like spent like the entire night, the night before the first class, like studying the route, trying to figure out, am I going to run into anything I don't like? Are there stairs? Is there an uphill ramp? Where, like, what is where? And you know, it'd be very intensive. I'd be researching it like I was going into a foreign country. So
And
yeah.
so if there is another student going to uni similar to you next year, what will be the best advice that you can give the person?
Oh, someone take you to uni and give you a really thorough tour. And it would be super good if they could find someone to be friends with that who's gone to that uni, you know, or someone who's currently there that can tell them about where things are. Because like I said, I didn't discover there was a women's room until the 3rd year, and that was from someone who was doing a double degree and in her 6th year. So, you know, I don't know how long she knew about the women's room, but she was, you know, in her 6th year of uni. So, and I didn't know by the 3rd. So, yeah.
So do you think the orientation that uni have for everyone is not good enough?
Yeah, definitely not good enough, especially like we're supposed to go check out uni technically for orientation week, which I kind of attended 2 days of, and then I was just like, this is too exhausting. I can't show up. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Ailey. Cecilio, can you give your thoughts in this?
Yes. For actual students with actual disability, it is really overwhelming. And in my personal experience, what has actually benefited me was having a one-on-one mentor within the actual first year to actually help me acclimatize to university, and also having support from the actual lecturers in actually understanding the actual coursework, and reading things such as referencing, because for example, people on the actual autism spectrum, there is a lot to actually deal with. And also from a cold perspective, not only do they actually have to manage the actual getting to know the actual state and the actual university, but there is also a language barrier that they have to also work through, and trying to understand what all the different cultural meanings are, and that in itself is quite difficult. So, so it is really important that there is an actual foundations program during before the start of universities for people with a disability, to get to know the university grounds, get to know the actual lecturers, and that way the actual support structures, and also having the disability access plan is really important to help them succeed during university, because university is really tough. And I have experienced it. Just in my first year, I actually went through depression and also suicide because of how intense it got.
Thanks, Cecilio. I would like to introduce now Hitika. Hitika? Hitika is a psychotherapist. I will read her bio. Hitika Bhatia is an experienced psychotherapist at Blossoming Minds Therapy. She uses both clinical and therapeutic approach interventions using holistic approach to bring positive change. Hitika holds a Bachelor of Health Science, a Bachelor of Applied Social Science Counseling, and currently pursuing a Master of Medicine Trauma-Informed Psychotherapy from University of Sydney. Hitika is registered with the Australian Counselling Association and Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation Australia and have extensive training in cognitive behavior therapy, multicultural therapy, and other techniques of therapy. She also do use models like schema therapy and relationship cultural depending on the presentation and age group. Hitika has extensive experience working with students from multicultural communities, schools, teachers, and medical professionals. She understands the complexities and barriers associated with multicultural communities and were able to assist many students to overcome their barriers. Hitika, in your experience, based on your experience, what are the type of barriers that you identified among multicultural communities?
Thanks, David. So I think there's a loss of identity when coming from a multicultural background and going to uni, TAFE in tertiary education, because we don't understand the barriers that are out there in universities. So if you happen to not, if you're not doing well for many reasons that you can't have a good enough result for your family, because see, multicultural families, they thrive on marks quite a lot. So for them to understand what a pass, credit, distinction, high distinction is, that is a big barrier. So if you're getting 55%, they probably won't understand how hard that might have been. So gaslighting is a term now very commonly used. And what happens is that because of the parents probably most likely having very good intentions for their children, but they often gaslight them unknowingly, because when the kids will say that, you know, I'm going through this barrier, I'm not understanding, say, referencing or how this topic works, or especially international students, that it's a more hands-on practical approach that we have in our curriculum, as opposed to the subcontinent having a more so you know, read and learn the exact same thing approach. So often when they share their problems with their parents or families, they get shut down, and they don't find that a big enough issue. They wouldn't know, even if they did pass, even if it is by, you know, a 0.1, how big of an achievement that could be, as opposed to their family just listening to, oh, you know, you just barely made it through. And they wouldn't understand that maybe they just got past the referencing, or maybe they just got past maybe they didn't understand the accent of the lecturer. So gaslighting, I guess, is a very big thing that happens. It's mostly that's not intentional, but unfortunately that's the culture. They're also forced to study and be a certain way according to the family and culture, which clashes when you're out in the world, because they're two different worlds. Very how do I say, controlling and managed at home, and that is the environment for many subcontinent families. But when you come out, it's very open. You have a say, especially in Australia. You'd have a say. We're blessed to be in a country where we can actually share our views and values. But often the thing is, well, when this kid comes out, what is their value? Is it that value that they were brought up with and their home environment carries, or the open rallies and joining clubs and societies value? So they're a bit lost in that. Well, sadly, with being of color, a global issue exists that you always have to carry that burden with you. Some people are aware of what issues that may bring, and sometimes it's not even an issue, but because it's been, I guess there have been many issues in the past, so anybody with a little bit of color would be aware of, or maybe would be a bit self-cautious of how they might be perceived. So self-doubt is definitely carried too, along with all the other things that they're battling. And then the fact that, see, multicultural families, they never really own the place they have migrated. So in my experience, they're fighting the fact that, well, we are in Australia, but we belong to our country. So they never really own the place they are living, the country for theirs. And that really causes a big confusion in the student's life, because here we are when the voting time comes, whether to vote for Green or Liberals or Labour, but they don't know much about it, because at home all they hear or see or talk about is the news overseas, or which political party would be overseas, or the government overseas. So there's a lot of confusion and lack of knowledge that is also carried, which is a barrier in being, well, how do I fit in? I don't know much about how Australia actually works. So not only is it a big issue for domestic students, but international students, you put all these issues together along with 10 other issues on top of that. So their issues are much larger, but in a different context.
So,
Yeah.
Kitika, basically, from my understanding is, parents' role is very important in shaping up the children's future, in a sense of blending and also understanding the local culture. Quite often, parents, without realizing, they are more looking forward back to their home country, whereas by watching the contents of foreign contents, but the children are not aligned with their parents, and therefore the children are lost in transition. So when they go out from the home, they see a different world. When they come back home, they see a different world.
Yep, that's correct. And that confusion is adding to their loss of identity. Am I, so my background's Indian, and not only do I see clients of different backgrounds, but I can empathize with them, because I've gone through that, where I've been always told I'm an Indian, and I am. That obviously can't be taken away from me ever, but I did grow up here. So, and I've barely, I managed to go back like 4 times, and definitely not in the past 2 years, but this is the place I know. I grew up, but it was a big confusion, because I've always just heard, I was much more aware of what was happening overseas, which government was ruling, and whoever was in power there, more than understanding what was actually happening here. So, and I sometimes think that had I, when my dad was just comfortable with the Labour government, so anytime anything happened, no, Labour it is that you vote, and I'm like, and if I used to ask why, it was never really justified. Why not Greens? Why not Liberals? Why Labour? And I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just fixating on that example because it's on the top of my head, but it's the same thing with everything else. So you get into that confusion and you don't know where you stand. And then you go into self-doubt, because if there's a meaningful discussion, say if you've chosen economics or something at university, or taken that as an elective, obviously that would be a big barrier to face.
And another thing that you mentioned about the multicultural communities is the students' performance in school. Anything less than 90% is not good. So, based on this kind of what you call judgment by parents, what are your top 3 suggestions that you would like to provide to multicultural communities?
So the
Service providers in multicultural communities.
Look, I think because raising awareness of how challenging this could be, so being mindful that what you're offering them is something that maybe there is no need for it, because right now there are a lot of resources being offered, but quite frankly, some of them are pretty much to no use because that's not what the community needs. They need a lot of awareness of, one, the mental health effects of what this behavior can cause, bringing more awareness of where you are, where you live, having that. If somebody is bringing that awareness that this is all making me anxious, overwhelmed, to actually hear their child and see what you can do to help them, instead of calling them that you're being lazy. So, we hear procrastination being a very big thing right now. Quite frankly, right now, if I tell my parents that if I didn't get work done, I get to hear I'm lazy. Not the fact that, oh, maybe you're burnt out. Maybe you've thought about this a lot more. Maybe you're overthinking this. How do we, make it small goals, and how do we make them more achievable? So not always do you need therapy for the slightest of things, because it can be a way of life that can be encouraged, by big organizations like this one, that what they need is being more aware that their child might not be procrastinating, and having anxiety or feeling overwhelmed is not a mental issue, because they get classified as, you're crazy. And we've given you so much, we got you to a good place, you need to be more grateful, and all that pressures get carried and confused. So what my suggestion would be to actually bring more awareness that children do appreciate that, but they haven't gone through your struggle, so they can't empathize with you on the level that you want them to. But maybe you could reciprocate that by actually being more understanding and creating that connection with them, so that they feel that they're supported, so that would actually help them enhance their performance, and not the pressure that you add on.
And I think in the past you have mentioned that in multicultural communities, particularly from the subcontinent, generally speaking, that once a child has a trauma, and say if the school teacher were to say to the student or their parent that your student need counseling, most of them will stop talking to the school or avoid talking, because they think only when the kid is like shouting or screaming or running, only then that's considered mental health. So how do you explain to these sorts of parents how to manage this?
Again, awareness is a big thing, but when the school, I think there is there's a loophole to this. The loophole is that people of the subcontinent find teachers very respectful. So when something comes from a teacher that this is what your child is going through, I feel they're lacking this, and I feel that by going through to therapy and having that support will enhance their behaviors, their school performance, that is more likely to be taken seriously, because even to date, parent-teacher meeting by the subcontinent parents are taken very seriously. A word from the teacher is pretty much a word from God, and it is taken very seriously. Yes, there are times that they will think that, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. My child isn't crazy. But again, being persistent and following through in a more balanced, positive way can yield results in that area.
Hitika, there is a question Can students contact you directly for assistance?
For therapy, yes, for sure. Any questions too, I'm more than happy to answer.
So in that case, if you don't mind, can you put in your contact details in the chat box so
Of
that
course.
people can contact you?
Yes.
I will move on to Ailey now.
Yes.
Ailey, speaking for yourself, what do you look for from an education provider?
Well, as I've said before, I find the unstructured way that people were supposed to learn in uni, like really hard. So half my stress really when I was studying was actually trying to figure out the expectations. Often, like I felt the assigned tasks, it seemed kind of obscure how they were described. I wasn't very well articulated. I actually struggled with, just going with what I think the task wants and just doing it. I have issues of making sure I did the right thing. So I would end up spending way more time, maybe 70% of the time of that I spend on the assignment actually struggling with understanding the question than, actually doing the task because it caused me an enormous amount of stress to make sure that I was doing the right thing.
What you would like to see from an educational provider to support a student like yourself?
Well, it would be really good for a student like myself if I'm not asking for a lot of extra time, but I felt like maybe an extra week for the assessment would be good because I'll hand it in and then I want you to sort of tell me what you were expecting that I haven't included. Like, because I just, I just read what they want and I'm like, how much time do you want me to spend on this? Like, they just give sort of like the word and they say you've got to annotate it, etc. But everything else, I just felt like, how much detail should I include? Because I don't know if, like, I know a lot of other people who are on the spectrum, my friends, and we're all enormously big on details. We would like write a 10,000 word essay if you didn't actually tell us the word limit. So, we're just enormously stressed all the time. So I would like more guidance in that area. Even example from like the past, say, if there was a particularly, a few optimal examples of actual assignments, maybe not the exact same assignment, but, like something for us to sort of get the idea of what it should flow like and how it should be structured.
So you have registered, I believe you have registered with the Student Equity, Student Disability Unit. So therefore, they are aware that you have some disability. So is it easy to talk to lecturers who give those assignments and to talk to them to guide you prior for you starting the assignments? Will it be useful or do you think they will do that for you?
I think that would be useful. I don't feel like the lecturers ever knew any personal information about me. Like when I did run into serious trouble and I saw the psychologist at uni, her response was basically, well, you didn't tell me soon enough. I was like, I literally was stuck in my house, unable to leave. How can I tell you anything? But she's like, you didn't tell me soon enough, so I can't help you with anything. And I was like, okay, fine. So yeah, it would be good if lecturers and the teachers knew ahead of time.
Thank you, Ailey. Cecilia, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes. I think it is really important that that actual not only lecturers but also other other facilities such as the actual cafeteria and also the actual library have an actual understanding and awareness of some of the disability needs of a person living with a disability, and that also that giving people with a disability a lot of the direct information that they need at that point in time, such as giving information about what assistive technology is available to them, and if they are able to have an actual support person next to them to actually assist them with their actual assignments or just to help write assignments, it is actually really important, and also giving an actual layout of where the actual classes are is really helpful, because for as Ali has alluded to, people on the autism spectrum like information that is direct, and that they will really be appreciative of those sorts of bits of information, because if you do not give them real concrete answers, it can actually allow too much freedom. And for a person with a disability, we like structure, and that we also like things to be in some sort of routine for us, because it just releases our anxiety, and it actually helps us to do our work much more productively.
Thanks, Cecilia. I think one of the important thing here is the privacy issue. When you sign your consent form in the university to say that you provide your about your personal information, there are some limitations for universities to share those information with other departments. But at the same time, that need to be looked into in the future, so that, for example, the library staff or other department staff which are crucial to you need to be informed so they can be supportive of you. What do you think of that?
From like my perspective, I think many of, because one of the things that I have really experienced during my time at university is that not all teachers at university take disability seriously and really acknowledge our needs, and the problem with that is that they do not have the training or awareness of disability as a whole, and how it is helpful to have addressing the disability issues, and also supporting a person with a disability during university. And that things such as privacy, you do not have to actually go and say that we will you will actually give out information, but it is really important to just have a general idea of some of the issues surrounding a person with a disability, and that when the person with a disability comes to you for support, it is really important to you that you listen and that you activate on their concerns. Because, for example, education teachers, they're doing the actual who teach students in that degree. Some of them say no, you are on your own, and this is the way things are. And as an actual student, you are just left going, what the hell? You are, I am coming you for support here, and you are leaving me here to die? That is not a reflection of us as a student. That's a reflection of you as a teacher, and you as a university as a whole, on how you respect and see a person with a disability.
Thanks, Cecilio. Very informative information. From what I hear from you, I think there are two things that is important. One, some teachers, lecturers are not equipped to provide support for people with disability. Therefore, capacity building for lecturers in the field of disability is important so that they understand the needs of students with disability. And the second concept, what you're talking about, was a person-centered approach, where
Yes.
where the supports around a person with a disability is important for them to achieve their goals.
Yes, that is most certainly true. That is most certainly true, because as a university, if you make things more accessible for a person with disability, you are making it accessible for every student and every staff member in that university, and it will benefit everyone in the actual future.
Thank you, Cecilio. I have a question from one of the participants. Ailey, I appreciate if you can answer this question. In my role, I often have the opportunity to advocate for inclusion on various levels, often in an opportunistic moment and unprepared. Can I ask what would be the 3 top things you both believe I could point out to any education organizations to be more inclusive and open to people living with disability? Thanks, Mike, for the question. Ailey?
Well, I feel like that's a hard question to ask because, disabilities present in different ways. But I would say that if we're talking about the actual educational component, I think it would be really good to have materials be available in multiple formats as much as possible. I can't always use my eyes. I mean, sometimes my sensory overwhelm just makes it really hard to read or watch things. I mean, just walking around and needing to use my vision to travel, I get disorientated. Like I just get, vertigo or something. And listening might be better on those kinds of days. And then other times it's, the opposite. If I'm required to watch something for a course, I'd prefer to have the option to watch it as captions, or have that option so I can watch something in silence if I can't deal with noise on another day. So that would be very helpful. Another thing that would be really helpful is I don't always I don't often use a wheelchair or anything like that, but when I'm really overwhelmed, I find it really hard to coordinate in my later life outside of my house when I need to concentrate, look at where I'm going, speak, and walk at the same time. It's like literally impossible. So on those days, I actually have a wheelchair. When that happens, I'm actually not that good at navigating because I don't usually do it. And one thing I discovered being stuck in that wheelchair was I felt so bad for people who are in wheelchairs permanently, because I was like, this world is not made for you. I'm always like, oh no, I'm about to run into someone. And I was like, buses have their own lane. Why don't wheelchairs and bikes have their own lane? Why are there's not a wheelchair lane? So I'm not running into people every 30 seconds because they haven't noticed me because they're on their phone or they're on their headphones or whatever. So I think that would be helpful. I mean, everywhere has ramps and, you know, all access disability toilets, but it still hasn't stopped the fact that people keep running into me when I was in a wheelchair. And I felt so bad whenever I ran into someone's shin. I wasn't trying to do it. You just walked right in front of me, you know? And so that would be one of the other things. Yeah.
Thanks, Eileen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cecilio, do you have anything to say?
Yes. I think it would be good for actually for people with a disability to actually, well, for a education organizations actually have actual quiet space for actual people with a disability to actually go to do their studies with actual access to adaptive technologies. And also when it comes to things such as food, allowing us the actual options to order on an app or on online rather than actually having to queue down with everybody else in the actual cafeteria ahead of time would be a great option for us.
I completely agree, by the way.
Yeah, and also the main thing that education providers need to understand is that you have to make sure that as much as you can make things accessible for us to be able to support our actual learning. One of the things that I hate right now is the fact that in our university, we are pushing forward with online learning so much to the fact that all of our textbooks and all other things of doing our learning processes is moving in that direction. And for me, as a person with a disability, I learn much better in class. And having actual hands-on textbooks to be able to read and get information. So I think having that option and choice for us to do is really, really important.
Thank you, Cecilio. You have given a very good answer, because online education is not for everyone. So I think you have raised an important issue there, that online is not only for people with disabilities, for everyone. It's not suitable for everyone to go online. Some prefer face-to-face and some prefer online. And particularly for people with disabilities, there are other issues as well involved. Now we have one more minute. Hitika, if I can come back to you, can you give me one challenge based on your experience of a student from a multicultural community?
Challenge?
Yeah.
From a multicultural community. Okay. Fitting in, knowing what university is. I think that's really big. Because university by their families would be emphasized as somewhere you go, you study, you come back. But that's not all, because you need to know everything else in the university to make it through, whether it be socializing, whether it be part of being club societies, whether it be going to referencing tutorials in the library, or being part of any other festivities or just university events, to make it a positive experience.
All right. Thank you very much. We are sharp at 3 o'clock, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Cecilio, Aili, Hitika, interpreters, all the other members who participate today. I hope you have benefited from this session and hopefully would be able to use some of the strategies that has been identified, and look forward for you all to participate in the next session. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.